Welcome back everyone, I'm Caplays Games and we're back with more EVE Online action, and today we're going to be discussing the ship Capacitor. Well, what is the ship Capacitor? It's the total pool of energy that the ship uses to run any active modules fitted to it. You can see it here on the HUD, mousing over shows you all the information you need. So that begs the next question. What is an active module? Well, an active module is any module which has an activation cost listed on the attributes tab of that module's information page. So we'll just have a look, show info on this module, and we go to the attributes tab, and here we see an activation cost. So every cycle this module will remove this much capacitor from this total pool, so it's 171 every cycle. And down here you see activation time duration. This is how long the cycles are, so every 10 seconds this module will demand 171 gigajoules of capacitor from this pool. Now if there is not enough capacitor left in the pool, then that module will be unable to begin its next cycle and the module will go inactive and you will lose all the bonuses from that module. Now this can obviously be fatal if you're in combat and your resistances or repair modules turn off, because then you'll be unable to repair yourself and you'll explode. In PvP, if your warp jamming modules turn off, then your target can just escape. Or likewise, if your propulsion modules turn off, then your target will suddenly become faster than you and they'll get out of range of you and escape that way. Also, if you use laser weapons or hybrids or any other kind of weapon that has an activation cost and you don't have enough capacitors to fire them, then obviously they won't work either and you will be unable to keep firing. Warping also consumes capacitor, and the amount needed to warp being based upon the distance of the warp. If you have very low capacitor, you will enter warp, but you will drop out of warp short of your target destination, and you'll have to warp again to reach your destination. If you have no capacitor at all, then you'll be unable to even initiate warp. So let's dock up,
docking permission requested,
and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the capacitor. Okay, pretty much for the rest of this video will be in the fitting screen, so you'll have to get used to that, and the simulation will make it much easier. Okay, the capacitor does regenerate on its own. When we see up here in the top right, the capacitor, this is how much capacitor we have in total, just 3004, and this time next to it is how long it takes to go from zero capacitor to full capacitor. So you divide the two numbers by each other and then you get the average capacitor per second that naturally regenerates. I said average because the capacitor does not regenerate at the same rate all the time. It's not linear. When it's very high or very low, then it regenerates slower. It regenerates fastest at somewhere between 20 and 30% of capacitor. How long does it need to last? Well, that depends entirely on the activity you're doing. If you're a mining ship, then you really do want your capacitor to last forever, so it will say stable here instead of depletes in, because that will then allow you to run everything all the time. And this is important when you're mining, because you'll be out mining rocks for many hours. Likewise, if you're a logistics, which is a healer ship, if you run out of capacitor and cannot provide remote repairs to fleet members and one of your fleet members dies because of this, you will be held accountable by the rest of the fleet. And that's bad times, because they might kick you out and not invite you back. Also, some forms of PvE suit being cap stable, for instance running lots of combat anomalies where you're constantly warping from site to site to site and fighting more or less constantly. That's sometimes good to be cap stable for that. In most other activities, the capacitor only needs to last long enough to complete the task at hand. Perhaps this is clearing a room in a combat site or a mission, or perhaps it's small gang PvP that only lasts a few minutes. So once you understand the activity you're doing, then you can decide how long your capacitor needs to last. In the fitting window, you'll see that every time you add a module, it reduces capacitor, because obviously it's the fitting window is reducing the cap need per cycle. Sometimes changing ammunition can change a capacitor status. This is mostly for lasers and hybrid weapons. Projectile weapons, missiles and drones don't use any capacitor. Remember that this depletes in 0230 is with all of these active modules in green running all the time, and you don't necessarily have to have them all running all the time. So you can play around in Fitting Simulation and toggle the active states of them and see what difference it makes. Green means it's on and active, and red is its overloaded state. You click it again, it gets ghosted out, and this is it offline. So what you want to compare is the next stage, which is this, which means it's online but not active. You see, when it's online but not active, the capacitor becomes stable. So we know that if we turn off the micro-watt drive, then we can have everything else on the ship running permanently. And likewise, if we do the same with the armor repairer, we know that if we turn off the armor repairer, then we can have the micro-watt drive and everything else running all the time. So from that we can deduce that the capacitor runs out in 2 minutes 30 when both of these things are running. So in combat, you don't really want to have the micro-watt drive all the time, so if you go to a site, we don't need to micro-watt drive, so we're completely stable. Experimenting in this way is a good way of understanding your capacitor levels, because you'll learn in simulation what you can do in combat to boost your cap and make it last a little bit longer. So how do you improve the capacitor even if all this micromanaging still won't let you be cap stable or give you a long enough capacitor life for the activity you need to do? One way you can do it is to use enduring versions of modules, which is what we have here is an enduring armor repairer. This one of the variants is compact and enduring. We'll open a separate window for the Tech 1. We'll compare the attributes. Here we see here the Tech 1 has an activation cost of 160 every 12 seconds, and every 12 seconds the enduring has an activation cost of only 144. So quite a lot of active modules have enduring variants which have less capacitor use, so this can be good. You can change ammunition types, as we know with lasers. Things like standard M has less cap need. See, the cap went up to 243. Multi-frequency takes it down to 210. X-ray 230. And the same with hybrids. Hybrid charges are the same, they all have different capacitor use. Micro-watt drives are a very special case in point. When you fit a micro-watt drive, it actually reduces the total capacitor pool by a decent percentage. The Tech 1 reduces it by 25%. So if we compare the enduring and Tech 1, although the enduring does have 20 less activation cost, it's still reducing the total capacitor pool by 25%. Now instead of fitting enduring, I'd always say go for the restrained micro-watt drive, because the restrained micro-watt drive reduces the total capacity by less of an amount. The Tech 1 and enduring were both reducing it by 25, and this is only 20. So even though this is still requiring 20 capacitor per cycle more, it's giving you an extra 5% of the total back, and this is usually the best way of doing it. Many active modules, especially resistance ones, have passive versions which may have slightly less performance but use zero capacitor. For instance, if we look down here at the armor hardeners, we'll just fit one to the ship. There's an explosive armor hardener. See, it's green because it's active. It has an activation cost of 30. So it's 30 capacitor every 6.27 seconds. But if you go down here to the armor resistance coatings and select a Tech 2 explosive, it doesn't go green because it doesn't have an activation cost. It's passive. But again, if we compare their performance, the active one that eats cap gives us 44 resistance, and the explosive coating, the passive one, only gives us 24.3 So passive ones don't use cap, but they do have less performance. You'll just have to judge which one you want and what's best for you. So that's a few ways of reducing your capacitor need. There are also lots of ways to directly improve the capacitor. There are modules for mid slots, modules for low slots, rigs and implants. Okay, we'll start off with capacitor rechargers. Have a look at their attributes page. Capacitor recharge rate bonus 15%. So these reduce this capacitor recharge rate by 15%. As you can see, if we turn this one off, then the recharge rate goes up to 310.8 seconds, and when we turn it on, it goes down to 248.8. So obviously this will give you more capacitor per second because you're reducing the time it takes to go from 0 to maximum. Capacitor batteries are really good. These increase the total capacitor pool by quite a lot in this case. If we turn it off, the pool goes down to 1632, and if we turn it back on, it goes up to 3004, so capacitor batteries are excellent for that. This capacitor warfare resistant bonus is also something that only cap batteries do. There are two modules, energy Nosferatus and energy neutralizers, which are aggressive enemy modules used on you which leach capacitor out of your capacitor, and these reduce the effects of these by 22%. So not only are they giving you a huge amount of capacitor to your total pool, they're also reducing the amount which is stolen by these aggressive modules. So they're really good things to have, but their downside is that they're really hard to fit. 320 power and 30 CPU for the battery versus only 11 CPU and 1 power for the recharger, so batteries are good if you can fit them. Instead of fitting a cap battery, you can fit capacitor boosters. See, on its own, it doesn't affect the capacitor things at all. It's because it needs to be fitted with ammunition, and what these use are cap booster charges. They come in all different sizes, see, from 25 to 800 will fit in this one. And what these numbers mean is that is how much capacitor will be added to the ship each time you activate this module. So each time we activate it just now, it will give us 25 gigajoules every 12 seconds, which is the cycle time of the module. So the Cap Booster 400 will give us 400 gigajoules per 12 seconds, but we can only fit 2 of them because the larger the number is, the larger the volume of the charge is. And the 800 is the biggest one that will fit in this module. We get 1 of them, and it does 800 gigajoules per 12 seconds, so obviously just once. It's generally accepted that you should try and fit the largest size of cap booster that you can. This means that you do only get one activation before you have to reload, but the thinking is that you've injected so much cap that you'll easily have enough time to reload, because it's not like a rapid missile system. It doesn't take 40 seconds to reload, it's only the standard 10 seconds. Low power slots, and we have our capacitor power relays and flux coils. Now the relays, you see it in their attributes, these improve the recharge rate, so again they'll reduce the time, but these reduce any shield boosters you have by 10% effectiveness, so these are not good if you're using active shields. If you're using active shields, I'd strongly recommend you use the capacitor flux coil. Now, flux coils don't nerf shields at all. They do, they speed up the capacitor recharge rate, but they also reduce the total cap pool. So these just give you less cap but regenerate it faster. There is another low slot module, which is the power diagnostics system. This gives a small amount of both capacitor recharge rate bonus and capacitor capacity. It's only 4% and 7.5% respectively, but it does also give the ship 5% extra power grid. So if you fit this could give you enough power grid to fit a bigger battery and mean that you don't need all these other things. But again, that's something you're just going to have to experiment with yourself. There are also 2 rigs. that affect capacitor. These are the capacitor control circuit and the semiconductor memory cell. The semiconductor memory cell just gives you 15% extra total cap to the pool, and the capacitor control circuit reduces the regen time by 15%. Implants wise, there's two main families of implants which provide capacitor to your ship. There's the EO6 range, which runs from 1% to 6% variations, and these just reduce capacitor recharge time. And there's the EM8 family, which again runs from 1% to 6% bonus, and these add capacity to the total pool. So that's a lot of different options, an awful lot. With this huge array of mid slots and low slots and rigs and implants to choose from, you'll have to experiment and see which combination of cap batteries, rechargers, power relays, flux coils, memory cell rigs, cap control rigs and implants will give you the best outcome for your fit. Do be careful not to have too many modules dedicated to capacitor on one fit. This may mean that the performance of the ship has been compromised in other areas. For example, what we'll do, we'll put the battery back on this. See, it's showing cap stable now because we removed the two drone things and put these two cap things on. So now we have two lows, two mids and the rig. This is maybe a little bit too much, because when you have lots of cap stuff in mids, obviously this is usually your webs and warp scramblers and targeting stuff and damage application things that go here. And if you have too many in the low slots, obviously you're losing your damage, because this is where all your damage modules live. And again, you don't really want to have all three rigs as capacitor, because you can boost lots of other good things with rigs. So don't go overboard with capacitor modules. If you think you are using perhaps one or two too many cap modules, then consider removing some active modules and replacing them with the passive versions. One good tip I'd suggest is, first of all, fit the largest capacitor battery you can and then go on from there and see what else you need. Of course, one other way of doing it is just to remove all the other cap stuff and just rely on having active capacitor boosters. One or two of them is only one or two mid slots, and as long as you've got enough capacitor boost charges in your cargo hold, then you'll be cap stable as long as you can keep going. But that is a lot extra micromanaging, and if you run out of cap booster charges, then you're in trouble. So to round up, you have to find the balance in your fitting and your capacitor. You need to know what you're doing, how long your capacitor needs to last for, what modules you can turn off during that activity to maintain capacitor, and also you need to balance the fitting of it. So yes, this guide is more or less ending by me telling you to go and find out for yourself, but that's just how it goes on EVE Online sometimes. There are no hard and fast answers. Ship fitting is an art form and you need to master it yourself. So I hope this quick guide to the capacitor has been somewhat informative, and I hope you come back for the next one. I don't know what the next one will be, but I'll find something interesting to talk about. Until then, take good care of yourself and all those around you, and I'll talk to you again soon.